So, hello everyone. Welcome to this online workshop on underground water resources, especially on studies that have been led to measure what resources are available. This workshop is co-organized by PRO-WASH and SCALE and by the USAID TerresEauVie project. So we're looking forward to sharing lessons and points of view from a few activities that have focused on water security and resiliency. And we all know how important that is. This is so important for sustainability. Also things like food security. And everyone is drawing on underwater aquifers. And what's the consequence? There are a lot of negative impacts when you drill a lot of wells, especially when you don't have the right information that you need. And some people have undertaken these studies to better study underground water resources. So we'll be sharing that information today and discussing it. This workshop is available in both English and French. So for those who want to follow along in French or in English, look for the button at the bottom of your screen labeled Interpretation. And when you click on it, you can choose the language in which you would like to follow along in the meeting. If you have any problems, you can put something in the chat box and someone will be along to help you. The presentations are also available in French and English. There are two display screens you can choose from. You will see both the English and French presentations. That will allow everyone to follow along in the language in which they are most comfortable during this webinar. Next slide, please. I think a lot of us, we know each other already. My name is Hilaire Dongobara, and I work in water and sanitation. And it's been a while since I've seen some of you. And to make discussion easier during the webinar, we have 5 speakers who will talk about the studies that they've done recently. We have Madame Berry Ouattara, who will present a USAID activity. We'll also hear from Fatimata Sawadogo, who works on a water and sanitation project financed by the World Bank through the ministry, focusing on underground water resources. We also have Christophe Zanzé, who will be telling us about a similar study done in the Sahel region with co-water. Also, we have Justin Bailly, another colleague with Actea, who will tell us about an online workshop that was organized on underground water resources. And finally, we have Leonard Puya from the WASH cluster, who will speak to us about water resources management for better managing humanitarian crises. The interpreter is sorry, there's no sound coming through. Mr. Hilaire seems to have frozen. I think we've lost connection. Mr. Dongobara, we've lost you. Are you still here with us? I think that we may have lost the connection with Mr. Dongobara. I hope that we will be able to get that connection back in just a few moments. However, I think we can just move forward for the moment and move on to the speakers. So Fatimata Sawadogo, and then Justin Bailey, who will be with us in just a few moments. They'll be connecting. So I would like to give the floor now to Ms. Precious Sancho, who is a WASH advisor for USAID, the BHA at USAID. Over to you, Precious.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are. Thank you for attending this important event on water resources assessment, management, and security in the Sahel. My name is Precious Sanko, and I am a water, sanitation, and hygiene advisor with BHA based in DC. This work is the outcome of BHA-funded collaboration in 2022 and 2023 between TerresEauVie, PRO-WASH SCALE, and partners in Burkina Faso. The sharing of knowledge and information on local water resources is a very important part of this work on multiple use water services. We know that information on groundwater resources is not always available to all stakeholders, especially those at the local level. Collaboration and communication are vital, and all voices must be heard. It is only through effective knowledge sharing that we will make progress on the road towards water security. As we begin to feel the effects of climate change, water security and water governance are more important than ever. We all play a role in strengthening our ecosystem and progressing towards a more resilient and sustainable world. USAID is proud of its partnership and the efforts which we have made towards water security. As we continue to collaborate in Niger and in the region, we look forward to a more prosperous, sustainable, and resilient water secure future. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy this event.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you for reminding us that water resources are an important part of water security, and that the better we know them, the better we'll be able to act. That's a very important point. I think we will start our series of 5 speakers. And I know we don't have a lot of time, so if you do have any questions during the presentations, please put them in the chat box, or there's also an option at the bottom of your screen labeled Q&A, and you can submit your questions there as well, and we'll try to answer them as they come in. So I would now like to give the floor to Abibata Ouattara from TerresEauVie and USAID, who will present the study that she did as part of this project. Madame Ouattara, you have the floor, and please try to limit yourself to 10 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hilaire. I will certainly stick to 10 minutes maximum. As was said in the introduction, the more we know, the better we can act. And the theme that I would like to speak on today is the experience of TerresEauVie with studying and mapping water resources in our intervention area. Sorry that my connection is not great, so I can't turn on my camera. Next slide, please. I will pass through 5 main points. First, TerresEauVie's experience. Who are we? What our intervention area was. And then I will talk about how we conducted this study and present some of the results, lessons that we've learned. And then I will conclude with opportunities and a wider conclusion. Slide, please. TerresEauVie, who are we? We are a project that is part of the Increased Resiliency for the Sahel Rise 2 project financed by USAID, and we started in 2019, February 2019. The project focuses on 3 major elements: improving water safety, the productive and sustainable and use of land, and better management of risks, disasters, and stresses. So the study that we conducted is a direct part of our water security focus, because once again, the better we know this resource is, the more appropriate our responses will be. Slide, please. This means that across the 11 communes where we're working, we had 2 different studies that we led. The first focused on 3 communes specifically, which are in light blue, Tuguri, Yalgo, and Mani, across 2 regions of the country. The second phase, which began in between 2022 and 2024, focused on 8 communes, which are in dark blue here. You have Rolo, Namisima, Barasogo, Borum, Nagingu, Pisila in the center north, as well as Setenga in the eastern region in the Sahel, as well as Gaeri in the east region of the country. So the 4 other communes you see here are ones where we are present, but they were not part of our underground water resource study. Slide, please. In terms of our strategy for conducting this study, there were 2 main focus areas. The first was recruiting a consulting firm. We worked with OGETAD and then with BERA. And we also created a technical monitoring committee that worked with NGOs, state technical services, and the consulting firm to help us work on the study from the beginning through the writing of the report. We worked to involve stakeholders, especially at the municipal level. And we made a national level report after the first phase of the study. So the consulting firm used many different methods, geophysics, telecommunications, to produce the results of our study, which you will see on the next slide, please. In terms of results, we had many significant ones, but I would like to focus on a few specifically. As for hydrology, we studied over 1,400 boreholes during the first phase, which helped us build up a map of hydrogeology in the region, how water flows through it. And here you see the Mani region, where you have the overall hydrological map with information about flow rates. And here there are relatively high flow rates, which you can see in red here. Slide, please. Besides the hydrological results, we also collected data on water quality. During the first phase, we analyzed 400 water points. And then in the second phase, between 500 and 600, and we found heavy metals in some water sources, as well as coliform. This is a sign that at the end of our activities, when we work on water resources, we need to make sure that they are not contaminated. And on this map, you can see pollution risks across the Yalgo municipality. So in Yalgo, there are 205 samples that are analyzed with a 25% contamination rate. Slide, please. Also, another outcome of our study was a proposal for a water quality monitoring network based on hydrological observations and water quality we were able to identify water points where there were several abnormal readings or data points necessitating follow-up. So that follow-up, here you're looking at the follow-ups recommended in Burum, one of the municipalities. And you have the different boreholes and water points we identified, recommended for monitoring. And so that's an important part of water resource management. Slide, please. In terms of lessons learned and challenges, there are a few things we need to remember. The challenges are big, but here are a few specific ones. The first is a lack of technical skills at the commune level. This study was very complex, and at the communal level, there aren't hydrologists with the required expertise. The second challenge was institutional memory, especially, again, at the commune level, where people turn over quite quickly. So everyone who may have been involved during the study or at the beginning of the study, maybe they changed jobs, maybe they changed the region that they're working in. And so that really holds back or prevents buy-in and better results. Third challenge I would like to mention is a difficulty mobilizing resources to implement the water resources management program. In terms of best practices, here are a few. We retained first municipal water and sanitation technicians are important assets because we can also rely on them to take samples and send them to laboratories for further water quality monitoring. Another best practice is based on initial results. We had a student who was able to do thesis work, doctoral work, based on this data collection. There are also other NGOs that have used our mapping of existing water resources to organize other activities for installing and rehabilitating equipment. Slide, please. In terms of opportunities and conclusion, I can tell you that we had results from only 11 communes, but they are available for everyone to use, anyone who would like to use them. We also would like to share them around and make them available to the communes, to partner organizations, and we want to keep training local technicians so that they can interpret and apply these results. We have also shared out results at a national level at a very high level. That said, I would like to thank everyone for your kind attention. That's all for my presentation. Thank you. Hello, I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you for this presentation from TerresEauVie. We are hearing results from 11 communes, especially in the center and north of the country, which is a region where traditionally water issues are very difficult. So this data will be very helpful. So I hope that this mapping will help put measures in place to help recharge aquifers. Now I would like to hand it over to Ms. Fatimata Kinisawadogo, who will tell us about a water and sanitation project targeting the entire country and who did a similar study for the whole country. Fatimata, please tell us more about this study. The floor is yours. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Chair, for handing me the floor. This is Fatimata from Paya, and I would like to tell you about the intermediary results of a study we've been running since 2022 to identify areas, favorable aquifer areas. So This is just a preliminary report, and these are not the definitive results, but I would like to share it with you. We know that our country is covered 82% of the country is covered by crystalline basement rocks, which is a very difficult hydrogeological condition. We also know that water resources are very difficult to access and mobilize in this region. In terms of accessing drinking water, a lot of the population, especially those that live rurally, have a very low rate of access to drinking water. So we wanted to know, where can we mobilize water resources to respond to population needs, given the difficulty of access to the aquifer? So our goal was to identify favorable areas, and we used two approaches to reach our results. First, the classic method, and then also using artificial intelligence. We're using algorithms. This project should allow us to map out sites with high potential, and we hope to identify 50 target areas where we will dig test boreholes. And then after these boreholes are dug, we will finalize the map of potential aquifer zones. And we'll be using field data and pump data to build up this map, and using both the approaches I mentioned before, classic and artificial intelligence. Slide, please. So I said we use two approaches. First, classic AMC, and also an artificial intelligence approach. Here you have a map made using the classic AMC method. And you can see some of our national level results from favorable to unfavorable areas. These results were obtained using a set of criteria and indicators. We have three kinds of indicators that were used to produce this result. There's water availability, which uses data like billing information. Another indicator was accessibility. And the third indicator was exploitability, usability. So in dark blue, you have highly favorable areas where there's a superior water availability at less than 10 meters depth. Then in light blue, favorable areas, and in red, you have very unfavorable areas. This map is also divided up by watershed. Next slide, please. Here, this second map was made using artificial intelligence. And here there are more unfavorable areas compared to the classical approach. But at the national level, this is a national level map, and there's some of the important data is hiding at a lower level. Because some areas had different data sets available. And so these maps were submitted to our partners, shared with our partners, to help them, along with several recommendations, which we will make these recommendations in a second part of the project. We have been working on these recommendations, but they have not yet been confirmed. And in the second phase of the study, we're hoping that the artificial intelligence approach will provide better, more useful results than in the first phase. Next slide, please. As I said, this report is in an intermediary provisional phase. As work continues, we hope to keep using AMC AI with confirmed recommendations. We're hoping to improve our results and the maps we've produced and make regional, provincial, and even communal level maps. So more precision is needed in the data, but we're working on that. Our project hopes to confirm our map data with test boreholes, and that's already started. We have different test boreholes from 5 to 15 meters depth. We have had only a few negative borehole results. Most of the sites we've chosen based on our map have shown a fair amount of potential. Next, we will be validating and confirming our map data and moving on to making recommendations, but that's work that remains to come. In terms of lessons learned, I can tell you with this study, that a lot of inputs were needed. Both approaches required data about boreholes, but the data quality varied. So all of our partners, whether they be NGOs, state inspectors, they need to be well-informed and have the expertise necessary to collect data. And the data needs to be better categorized. And hopefully that will lead to more efficiency. Thanks for your attention. That's all I had to present to you in terms of our intermediary results. We will keep working, but I am out there in the field and my battery is almost out, so I might not be able to follow the rest of the meeting. Please excuse me. I remain available to answer any questions or any communications. And I hope to share more in the future in terms of observations and on our continuing work. Thank you, Fatimata. Thank you for all the work you've done in the field. And thanks for sharing your progress with us. It's amazing you're working at the national level. I know there are a lot of questions in the room here, so you can add your questions to the Q&A feature or to the chat, and we will pass those questions along to Fatimata, and she'll get back to you with an answer. And questions and answers will also be shared through the mailing list that we'll set up for this webinar. Next, I hand it over to my colleague Zanzé, who will talk about a water resources project in the Sahel region and what they've been able to find about underground water resources there. Mr. Zaze, over to you. Thank you. We can skip right to slide 3, I think. Yes. This study done with CoWater is part of a project that aims to improve economic outcomes for vulnerable populations in the Sahel region. Next slide. The purpose of this study, or of this study, was to use different criteria to map high potential hydrogeological areas in Dori, Falagundu, and Gorom in the Sahel region. We studied water across these 3 municipalities and will do so through 2050. The project happened in 3 phases. First, starting in 2023, and we started with mapping existing resources and hydrogeological information. We will then dig test boreholes in areas identified as having potential. In terms of recommendation, slide 3. So for recommendations, I can tell you, you need the time and resources that are needed. If you want to wind up producing maps, you want them to be able to be widely applicable and usable by multiple actors. So starting from the design phase, you have to be thinking about that. Second recommendation, you have to involve all stakeholders in the area. Each stakeholder can have different kinds of information that may be useful for contributing to the study. And finally, this is a proposal more like, choose an administrative partner that has the ability, the capacity to make the most of such a study and to share it out as widely as possible to as many stakeholders as possible in the water and sanitation sector. In our case, we created an intercommunal, or we had an intercommunal water and hygiene structure, which has local connections, and they were involved at every step of the study and were able to share out all of our results, improving awareness of underground water resources across the 3 communes. So the map on the far left is a groundwater resources map using certain criteria, and on the right, you have the one made using artificial intelligence. So they're quite similar, and they can almost be superimposed. The groundwater resources map across these 3 municipalities was thus created. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Zanze, for telling us about this study in Dore, Palakuntu, and Gorom Gorom. We now have a better idea of the hydrological resources available in that part of the country. And I think it fits in well with the one we just heard about, seeing that you use both a multi-criteria approach and an artificial intelligence approach. So hopefully that gives some food for thought to everyone following along. Next, I would like to hand it over to Justin from the Actea network, who will tell us about a groundwater workshop that took place about a year ago. Justin, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Hello, everyone. I would like to tell you about the Actea network and a recent workshop we held in Burkina Faso. Slide, please. Quickly, what is this network for? It was created in 2015 by 2 NGOs, PSO, and another. The first goal is to create a forum for exchange between different actors on concrete possibilities for concrete action. Also, to make resources available to stakeholders, especially documentation on water and hygiene. Another goal is to advise and support project initiators and leaders across Burkina Faso. And finally, to enhance the value and capitalize on current experiences. Next slide, please. As Hilaire was saying, in 2022, we held a workshop on groundwater resources. This led to a few recommendations that the participants came together to make. The first was to have better assessments of exploitable parts of water tables. What does that mean? What resources can be exploited based on existing resources? So it's not enough to know where the aquifers are. Can they be accessed? Next, some groundwater recharge zones need to be taken into account to better understand hydrogeological resources. This is done to a certain amount, but not enough, and especially not for recharge zones. Third recommendation was to more widely disseminate the results of hydrogeological studies to commune and regional authorities and other beneficiaries. Fourth recommendation, to establish thematic databases. Some databases exist, but they are not thematic. That will help better manage information. Our fifth recommendation is to ask for better control or better cooperation between the ministry and other actors. More and more people are using groundwater resources. So more collaboration needs to happen with the ministry so that these resources are shared out equitably, and that people have enough access to drinking water. Another important recommendation is to improve work sites to make sure that they are compliant. When you have groundwater resources and people go to exploit them, they don't always follow all the regulations in place. We need to make sure that they do. So I just went through quickly my presentation, but thanks very much for listening. That's what I wanted to share with you quickly. Thank you, Justin, for sharing these recommendations that came out of the workshop. And I know that these recommendations will be heard by and will stimulate thought amongst all the participants here. Now I will hand it over to Léonard. So I would also ask all presenters to look at the questions that are coming in, since we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. Sorry, the interpreter, sorry, the connection's coming in and out. There's questions about whether the primary data is reliable, and also questions about collaboration with different ministries. There are a lot of questions coming in, so don't hesitate to interact with our participants. So for now, Léonard, over to you for your presentation on the specific case of when groundwater resources are needed to provide drinking water to vulnerable populations. This was the subject of your study. You have the floor to tell us more about it. Over to you, Léonard. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to tell you about the results of our WASH cluster study in Burkina Faso. UNICEF financed this study. Starting in January 2021, we began to characterize the hydrological potential of some cities with high numbers of displaced persons within Burkina Faso. Our primary goal was to improve the knowledge and understanding of hydrogeology in 8 areas that have been struck by security crises. What motivated our choice of these specific areas? The notoriously difficult groundwater conditions there, and the need to increase the success rate of boreholes. These communes are mostly in the east and north, some in the Sahel region, and then some in the north region. The area covered by our study is often suffers from climate and hydrogeologic issues. So it's a primary focus of WASH and humanitarian initiatives. And there are many failed wells, failed boreholes, which leads to lower activity levels overall. We broke our study into two phases. The first, based on a multi-criteria analysis using geographic information systems. And the second, which used field studies and geophysical studies. Slide, please. In the first phase, we identified favorable areas based on existing data, such as teledetection and remote detection, and we had different hydrological criteria that contribute to favorability. By combining criteria, each area was assigned a favorability rating. So we used hydrology, information about water courses, and other kinds of information. Slide, please. In the second phase, we did more detailed localized information. We used satellite imagery, high resolution images, field reconnaissance, and geophysical measurements, and also information about borehole siting. Favorability for boreholes was then measured based on this information, and I'd like to share with you a specific result, a map of the watersheds around Dori and Gorgadji. So all of the favorability scores were divided into three basic classes. First, the favorable zones, which you see in blue, where there were higher favorability rates. And then you have medium or mediocre zones in the orangish color here, and then the unfavorable areas, which you can see in red, with lower water availability rates. In each of these three areas, we looked at boreholes with higher flow rates, and the number with at least 2 meters cubed per hour. You can see that at the bottom. And near Dori and Gorgagi, this was a unfavorable to mediocre area. We adopted a strategy to share out this information and this research. Slide, please. So in terms of sharing out the information, we had direct involvement from some national structures, such as the Water and Sanitation Ministry, and other members of the Burkina Faso WASH cluster. In terms of sharing out the results, we had held 2 workshops and also worked on messaging and electronic sharing through the cluster. And we brought this information to national and regional cluster meetings. So amongst the partners that are part of the cluster, we sent them a survey about how they might use this information. And they said that the results were quite interesting to them, and they thought they could find ways to use the information as part of their projects. So that means we really have to work on sharing them out even more. So we'll have to find channels that go outside of the cluster, outside of the ministry, to help share these results more widely with the hydrogeological community. And we need to go into the areas where the research was conducted to share the information as well. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Leonard, for your presentation. I will recall that this workshop is to discuss how to make this information, such information, available and useful. And how we can better share approaches and experiences across different areas of the country. We now have a few minutes to take maybe 2 questions. If you have a question you would like to ask, you can raise your hand. There's a raise your hand feature. But since time is short, I would ask that you be as concise as possible. And hopefully we can fit in 2 or 3 questions before moving into the recommendation phase. So are there any people with their hands raised for the moment? Or rather, do the speakers have questions they would like to answer? Any hands raised? Judith, is there a hand raised? I don't see any raised hands, but I do see some interesting questions in the chat that have not yet been answered. We have a question, which is, I think, for everyone. What strategy can you use to collect this type of primary data? And what was the contribution of the state, of the government? So that's a pretty general question that applies. Another question for all 5 are is climate change included in the parameters that have been used? And also, what are the current conclusions so far of the studies that have been held? There are a few more technical questions. Maybe the presenters can answer them in the chat, such as the presence of fecal coliform bacteria in the TerresEauVie study. Someone wanted to know more about that. Yes. In waiting for responses from our presenters, maybe we can start with the one about data and the role of the state. Personally, I can say that it is the state's responsibility to put structures in place, structures that work, so that if someone is going to dig a borehole, they have a likely chance of success. So there are already existing government offices that have this responsibility. We've looked at a lot of statistics on existing infrastructure, and the data was already available. We just used it to create projections and to feed it into AI. So that anyone who goes out to dig a borehole will have access to this information. Maybe Fatimata has something to add, more specific details, but those are the kinds of recommendations we've made. Oftentimes there are regulations on the books, but people don't follow them, or the information is available, but people don't look at it. And then as for coliform bacteria, is Alibata still here with us? In Yalgo, there were many wells with coliform bacteria present. Yes? So I know that even in Ouagadougou, I have a friend who just dug a well, and there was coliform bacteria in the well. So people are digging wells in inhabited areas where there are also toilets. So the bacteria infiltrates the aquifer. So we all work in the sector, and I think we should all be sharing more of this information to build up everyone's capacities. Yes, yes. Oh, I'm still here. Yes, if I can add. It's true. The boreholes that we studied were ones that were already operational. There's the wells are dug with a permit, but then other activities spring up around them after they're already in use. And so there's also a lot of open air defecation, especially in rural areas. So these are just some of the causes that can lead to contamination, waterborne contamination by coliform bacteria. Yes, thank you, Alibata. Would anyone else like to add to that? I see Sandri Ngum. These are other people from the sector I know well. Maybe they have some clarifications to add. I see also Ludwin and UNICEF Dori. I don't know if you have something to add. If not, Fatimata has her hand raised. Yes, Fatimata, go ahead. You have the floor, Fatimata. Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. This is Aliatou Galbane from UNICEF. I had a problem with the link, so I had to use Fatimata's. But thank you to the presenters. I would like to know, when your study results identified favorable areas, what was the success rate in those areas? Did you have boreholes that were dug there that were successful? And if yes, what was the success rate compared to what the study predicted? Also, was any analysis done with regard to climate change? I think other people asked the question, but if so, what has the impact of climate change been on aquifer recharging and groundwater recharging? Thank you. Yes, thank you, Zaliatou. In terms of climate change, I imagine that once we have the final results from the PAIA study, which covers the entire country, we'll be able to compare that with the hydrological map of Burkina Faso from 1970. So after 50 years, we'll be able to see a difference between the two maps, and perhaps we can attribute some of that to climate change. But maybe there's someone in the room who can clarify that for us. And then I wonder if Zanze would like to speak more, or maybe Alibata and then Leonard. When we talk about highly favorable areas, what is a success rate in these areas? What can we expect? And when your studies or the information has been used by other partners, has any follow-up been done to confirm the validity of the results? I hand it over to the presenters, and then we'll move into the second part on recommendations. Yes, I can tell you a bit about what we've been doing in Gorom Gorom Duri and another municipality. We have dug some boreholes, done some geophysical studies, especially in hydrogeologic potential areas identified by the classical approach and artificial intelligence. We used satellite images to identify localized faults in the local geology. And so that's all we've been able to do for now. Hopefully, in a few weeks, we'll be able to do a field visit and see what actually is there on the ground. So for now, the satellite images have revealed geologic faults with high hydrogeologic potential. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Zanzé. Maybe we'll be following closely as more information comes out. Maybe Alibata, or you have anything to add? Yes, I'm here. In terms of TerresEauVie's results, we have not yet had the opportunity to dig our own test bores. We're not yet in that phase of the study, but our goal is to make this information available, and then maybe other partners will go out and dig test holes. We have not had the concrete ability to dig test bores in these different areas. Maybe in the last minute we'll be able to do a few, but so far the context on the ground has not made that possible. Maybe the situation will get better, but we also hope that partners on the ground will use our results to dig their own test bores, and that will, at that point, we'll have a better idea about the success rate of our identification method. Thank you, Alibata. Leonard, do you have anything to add? I know you did a study in 2021, and humanitarian NGOs use your information. Did you have any feedback, any comments on the ones that used your information about their success rate? Thank you. Yes, we did send out our own survey at the beginning of 2022 to collect information from our partners about how they used our information and what the success was. We were able to show that some partners in our research area did use our information, and they did tell us that they use our information to decide on where to dig boreholes. It's been 2 years since we sent out that survey. In terms of success rate, again, we had different favorability classes. We had 3 of them. For, as I said, the first class had a score of 0.6, and that's what you could see in blue. And so that's a success rate of about 60%. In the medium areas, it was a success rate of 45 to 50%. And in the last one, unfavorable, was a success rate under 45%. Thank you. I know that there are many wells and boreholes that are dug based on information that isn't localized enough. But hopefully when we have national coverage data, that will help us better predict where successful boreholes might be dug, especially when that information is cross-checked with actual boreholes. I think that we can move forward. Maybe we have time for one more question, Bella? I think I would like to answer, give some more information about the co-water study. There was one question that came in about distances between urban and rural areas. You have to realize that there's been insecurity in Burkina Faso, and given that context, there are 2 problems. First, if you have to go out and take samples from wells that are far off the Sahel, far from cities, those samples then have to come back to Ouagadougou to be analyzed, and that takes a lot of time. And that's a real problem. Next, our intercommunal model, as part of our project, we coordinated work between 3 communes, focused mostly on water and sanitation. So this intercommunal cooperation, or there's a structure that manages water issues for all 3 communes. So none of them individually has to worry about water issues. It's also a technical structure, which is an advantage, especially since it's handling water issues. And it has partners all over the place to help work on different issues that may arise. So I hope I've answered the question that I saw. And everything for this structure is set up. They're just waiting to sign a final agreement, and then it will be official. So that's what I wanted to share about the intercommunal structure. And it should be finished by the end of 2024, the creation of it. Yes, thank you. Also, when it comes to climate change, we've had questions about climate change and its impact on potential favorability. Yeah, we included climate data such as rainfall levels. All of that is influenced by climate. And we did our best to capture the impact of climate change, but the data that we used, the borehole data that we had, sometimes the boreholes are very old, they're 30 years old, so there is some bias. To get around that, we try to work with as many partners as possible, get as much data as possible in order to reflect reality as best as we could. So that's how we've tried to account for climate change. Great, thank you. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, everyone. I think that we'll move forward. We have 25 minutes left. So we'll move on to the next part of our workshop, namely the reflection. I hope that everyone can connect through the link that we've just put in the chat. So either you can scan the QR code that's here, or you can click the link in the chat, and that should take you directly to our reflection website, platform rather. And that will allow you to answer some of the questions I would like to ask now. I'll give everyone a minute or two to get connected. There we go. Suzanne, let me know if you think everyone's connected. Oh, I see we have 11, 12 people. 12 out of 60, that's all right. Okay, it's moving up, it's moving up. More people are getting connected. I'll give you one more minute to click on the link in the chat or scan the QR code. We have 22 people now out of 65. 25. I think that's enough. Okay, let's get started. The first question, have you ever needed information about water resource availability and potential, or groundwater resource availability and potential? Have you ever needed that kind of information working in water and sanitation or in some other area? Have you ever needed information about groundwater resource availability and potential? So that's the first question. We're waiting now for your answers. Oh, I'm seeing some yeses. A lot of yeses. Yes, of course. So yeah, many of us have needed information about groundwater availability and potential. We still have a few more people reacting. Great. So I think that we can say that overall, nearly all of us here today have at one point or another needed information about groundwater availability, either as part of our work or privately. Maybe you do some farming on your own and you want to dig a borehole. You need that kind of information. Once you get access to that information, how have you used groundwater study information? How did these studies help you to better plan or to make better decisions about protecting or using water resources? It's a long question, but basically, how have you used study information like these studies about groundwater resources? And how has that information helped you plan or make decisions around water protection and supply matters? What so if you have used such study information, how and why? Perhaps, Hilaire, I think we only have 33 people connected to the platform. So maybe not everyone is connected. Could they perhaps raise their hand if they want to answer orally? Yeah. If not everyone is connected to the interaction platform, you can also raise your hand and speak directly. At the bottom of your screen, there should be a raise your hand function, which you can use to answer the question directly if you aren't connected to the website in the chat. Yes, people use such a study to choose a site or to do a quality study of 50 boreholes. Yes, other people as part of a water sanitation security project. Others have used information to transform existing boreholes, especially, or to make them more high output. That's a big problem. So yeah, oftentimes these studies are used for exploration to find favorable areas. Oftentimes in borehole contracts, a certain number of useful boreholes are required because a dry borehole won't get paid for. So I see someone else used physiochemical information from such studies and also use such studies, yeah, for siting. I do have another question I had to come back to. Someone here is talking about water quality. And what happens, or what happened to the boreholes with high levels of nickel and arsenic? That was one of the questions we got. I'm wondering if one of our speakers can tell us about that. So yes, study data can be used to avoid polluted or dry boreholes. And maybe our friend who wrote that, you can share more information with us. How do you use groundwater study information to have more information about consuming populations, water consumers, or to raise awareness amongst them. I wonder if whoever put that in might want to raise their hand and tell us out loud what they meant by that. Yes, to check the quality of data. Yeah, when you're going to build a project, you want to make sure that the data is reliable and that you're on the best site possible. Yes, was there someone who wanted to speak? Also, yeah, yes, go ahead. Yes, this is Patrice, a water resource manager. Oh, I was the one who wrote raise awareness amongst the consuming population. When you have study data for areas with high hydrogeologic potential, you can raise awareness amongst the population and say, okay, maybe don't dig latrines in this area to avoid pollution. So in high hydrological potential areas, I think you have to do that kind of awareness raising. Otherwise, people might do something to negatively impact the resource. Thank you, Patrice, for this comment. You know, Burkina Faso, we have a high level of hydrologic stress. And our high favorability areas, we really have to do a lot to protect them. And there are different activities that can compromise the quality of water resources. We can also focus on recharge areas. TerresEauVie was the one, I think, who said that they're working on that and taking steps to protect recharge areas and to promote groundwater recharge with different landforms that slow down the flow of water, for example. That can help with recharge. So thanks for all the different responses we've gotten in. I think we can move forward again. Next question. How can the results be made available as much as possible? And how can they be used by as wide as possible a variety of actors? What formats are best for you? With the goal of granting access to as many users as possible. So once again, how can the results of these studies be made available as much as possible? And how can they be made useful to as wide a variety of actors as possible? What formats are best for you in terms of using this data and sharing out this information? So you can answer in the reflection platform or in the chat box for those who are having trouble getting to the website. Okay. Oh, we have to put the studies online. That's a good point. Yes, maybe all the studies can be centralized by the ministry, put in one central place. The results also have to be shared out at the local level and then also at the national level. Yeah, you know, when you're out there in the field and you go into a commune, and if you don't have the report with you, you have to go all the way back to Wagga for this information. So maybe we can rely on the WASH cluster to help make such information more available. Yes, sharing out this information more at the national, subnational, and regional level. Maintain a cluster mailing list. Yes, there are a lot of relevant actors. And we can also make it available through regional directorates and provincial directorates. Maybe even at the commune level, we could send directly, send the results directly. But of course, on the official ministry website, PDF is a very accessible format. I see that. Maybe a dedicated water resource knowledge website. That's a good idea, yeah. And maybe bringing all the results together in one place and sharing them out. Also, so I'm seeing a lot of people say, put the information online. Yeah, with growing digitalization, we can all have better access to such documentary resources. Someone else is talking about creating flyers or other forms of documents for communicating with the wider public. Yes. It would be great if you went into the office of a technical officer at the commune level and you saw this report on their shelf. That would be good. Using results, using channels like the cluster and the ministry's website, bringing all the studies together in one centralized place. So quickly, I'm hearing about making studies available up and down the chain from the ministry to the regional, provincial, and local levels, maybe even at the commune level. And then also, I'm also seeing putting the information online. A lot of people are saying that could help. Another proposal is training local actors to better make use of these studies. That's a good idea. But as Alibata said, we have the problem of instability. So training people today has become more and more complicated. So I think putting the information online will make it available to the greatest number of people. Yes. All right. We have 1 minute left. Last question. What would be your recommendations? What would be your recommendations for carrying out such studies and making the results of existing studies more widely available? So we're still only covering a few communes. TerresEauVie worked in 11, another one of the projects, or UNICEF in 8. So there are a lot of communes out there that haven't been covered. I think there are dozens and dozens of rural communes that we can still work on covering. So it's a matter of finding people who are ready and willing to do those studies. And also it's a matter of, also we'd like to know, what are your recommendations for making the results of existing studies more widely available? So that's the question. What are your recommendations? What are your recommendations? What would be your recommendations for carrying out such studies and making the results of existing studies more widely available? Seeking financing for better coverage of communes, yes. There are some communes with very low access rates. But resources would be needed to finance such studies. Any other recommendations? Yes, it's important to map out all of these studies together. Yes, to maybe create a map of all existing studies. Another idea is to better integrate the issue of climate change and how these studies are carried out. Regional directors may also be good resources for finding organizations that can lead similar studies. Yes, better coordination of different interventions, pooling of resources. Often there are a lot of people, groups working in the same area. That's a good opportunity for pooling resources and information, especially with and for these kinds of studies. Also, there's the Ministry of the Environment, Health and Sanitation, which has access to information about boreholes and maybe could make that information more available to improve the quality of these studies. Yes, I think in the past you had to make requests, direct requests to prefects, and then the prefects would contact technical services, water, hygiene, technical services to follow up on the request. Is that still the case or has that changed? That's a question that we got. I don't know if anyone here has the answer. Also, yeah, it would be important to find financing resources for sharing out this information, working with different ministry services, decentralized services to help make these studies more widely available. Also doing advocacy work for or to the ministry and trying to get other actors involved. We need a GIS database with on-demand access. Yes. Could the person who wrote that maybe explain a little bit more? I'm not sure I've understood completely the GIS database. How would that work? So could that person maybe, we only have 1 minute, but do you think you could turn on your mic and tell us more about what you meant by that? Yeah, we're all living in the digital age. We should be making the most of the opportunities created by digital technology. So can someone tell us a little bit more about that? About the GIS database, the issue of a GIS database? I'm seeing people talk about better coordination with the ministry. Also working with commune level technical services and training them to work with digital tools and paper tools. Also, there needs to be a budget set aside for sharing out this information. And the state should also be financing these studies that they're carrying out so that they can be carried out. And if there is going to be a WASH project in a given area that has not been covered by these studies should be part of their plan and budget. Is another recommendation. So it's great to see all of these recommendations. They're all very relevant. I hope that some of them will be able to take it, be taken up rather, and that such studies will become more common, and that eventually we'll be able to cover the entire country with these studies. That's all for our webinar today. I want to make sure we end on time. We do have one last little survey for you. Is that ready? Suzanne, is that ready? Yes, we shared it in the chat. Okay, great. So there's a link to a survey in the chat. Click on the link and answer it's just a few questions. But it really helps us to have your comments and feedback about this online workshop. especially as we design other workshops in the future that will be similar. So I'll give you a few minutes now to answer that survey. And they can keep answering after the meeting closes, right? Yes, we can leave it open, no problem. All right, well, a big thank you. We're 60 people now, but we had almost 75 people at peak in this workshop. So it is clear that this subject is very interesting to people. The issue of groundwater is so important, especially for countries in the Sahel region, where we all have problems with dry wells and etc. So the results of these studies about water resources, you can help us share them out. You have the links to these studies and these reports. Share them with whoever you'd like. And we will also have a mailing list. Join the mailing list and we'll share out these studies and other information as it becomes available. So that's all from us. Thanks for spending this hour and a half with us. It was a very dynamic workshop, and I hope that we will all see each other again soon for other events of this kind. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. And Judith, over to you, if there's anything else. No, just thanks, everyone. I don't have anything really to add. Thank you to everyone. Yes, thanks. Thanks to everyone who joined. Thanks to our speakers. Have a great rest of your day.